How's it going? We're back with a special guest today. My name is Tyler, but we're here with Lamar Giles, the author of Star Wars Sanctuary, a Bad Batch story, which is a whole lot of fun from start to finish. If you haven't gotten the chance to read it yet, make sure you go get your copy today. If you have already read it, we're definitely going to be talking about it all the way, through. But for the most part, we're going to keep a lot of the spoilers semi out of this for those of you who haven't. So if we get a little spoilery, I'll let you know. But Lamar, thank you for hopping on. This is going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. This book was a blast
Thank
from
you.
start to finish. So thank you for joining us. And I just have to ask, you after writing a short story from a certain point of view, like what was that like getting the call to do a full-fledged novel, like long form, story here?
It was daunting. It's a great call to get, but there's also a different level of pressure and visibility when you know your name's going to be on that cover by itself and not with the 39 other
Mhm.
contributors from the anthology. So I was happy to get the call, but also very nervous. And when I got the call and they told me they wanted me to do the Bad Batch, that was exciting because I've been watching the show, loved it, and and then I got
Yeah.
some of the requirements, which is it had to be in season two,
Mhm.
and it couldn't contradict anything that came before or after it. Which
My
is sort of
goodness.
yeah, it's sort of a hard thing to figure out when season three hasn't come out yet. Like at that point, I don't think we even had a trailer, and so it was like okay, and it was one of those things where they're like, do you think it'll be a problem? And I go, no, of course not. That's simple.
It's not gonna be a
Easy,
problem. No
easy,
way. I
light
got
work,
this.
light work, light work. And then I immediately panic when I know I actually have to pull it off. But
Mhm.
we got to it, and I'm sure we'll get more into the details on how
Right.
the whole process went. But it was a fantastic time.
That I can't imagine that's gotta be stressful. You're thinking because season 3 hasn't come out yet. You're like, oh man, we gotta thread this needle here, figure it out. But so you were a fan of the Bad Batch already? Like you had already watched, or was this more of a you had to do some like homework? You said you were a fan.
Now I was up to date. I had finished season two,
Mm.
but
Okay.
it's way different being sort of a casual fan and then
Mhm.
being asked to actually contribute and canonize stuff. And so, like the analogy I always use is it's like, I'm enthusiastic about science, but then someone calls and says, hey, you got a month to get a degree in physics. And that's the level of intensity it becomes in
Okay.
terms of going back, studying, and trying to like
Mhm.
really nail down every detail. And plus, I had the job of figuring out where in the season the story would take place because the only directives I had was it's in season two. They would love if Fee Noah was in it, and
Okay.
can you work with that? So that gave me a little bit of direction, but I still had to figure out exactly where this takes place, when in the timeline, and that got a
Okay.
little scary as I started
Mm.
going back through season two until I hit the Pabu episode, and then I had it.
Oh, of course. So that has to be challenging just thinking about, okay, we want Fee to be in the story.
Mhm.
Go from there, and then you're like, okay, here we go. Now, did you know you wanted Tech to be in the story from the start, or did you think, okay, what if after Tech had died,
Mhm.
and then you bring Fee into it as like some sort of like remorse story going on because you do have there's a lot of fireworks between the two here in the
Yeah,
story.
I knew Tech was going to be in it. Like I knew for a fact just because of where I was putting the story. I wanted
Mhm.
to do it before the finale. I don't know if I even had an option to do anything in the finale episode or past
Oh,
that.
okay.
So it became just sort of like Tech's there. We know he's there at
Mhm.
this particular
Yep.
time. So that part was not much to think about. What
Mhm.
became the thing I had to sort of like figure out is how I would play with Tech and Fee's interaction, given what we've already seen on screen.
Mhm.
And in that regard, and this is me trying to avoid spoilers for anyone who maybe not caught up or hasn't read the book yet. All I did was, and it makes it sound like it's easy. I'm not gonna say this was easy, but what I did was try to imagine the scenes I would have expected to see from
Mhm.
Tech and Fee anyway.
Right. And one of the best parts about the book is the little inner monologue that goes on with each of them. And I think multiple times you wrote in the story how Tech would say, I got to tell her how I feel about this at some point. And Fee would say, I need to, be honest with him about this at some point and just say it how it is, even though they both know pretty much how the other are feeling, but they never really, outwardly said it. As a fan of the show leading into writing this, was writing that relationship dynamic between the two, was that a little bit like more sad to write? Was it like difficult to be like, oh man, I'm hurt, I'm tugging at my own heartstrings here? Or was it really satisfying being able to kind of, like you said, talk about conversations that were going to happen if they were able to?
It was sad and satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, from what we get in the show, we know that they never said those things to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had fun getting into their heads and getting the opportunity to say, hey, we are thinking this. What you all are seeing at home, we're also thinking about in our heads.
Yeah.
It's really there. But I also recognize from a human perspective, a mortality perspective, I think a lot of us go through life thinking that we have a lot of time to say the important things. Some
Mm-hmm.
people do, unfortunately, some don't. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
especially tragic when something happens and the people are left behind saying, I wish I'd said it.
Absolutely.
And I think that would definitely be the case
Mm-hmm.
in the situation of Tech and Fee.
I kept thinking along similar lines the entire time I'm reading this. Is just every single moment you put a little paragraph in there of the two of them interacting that way. I kept thinking, oh my gosh, if only they would just say it, like scream it. And obviously they don't. But there's other members of the batch too I want to get into. But before we do that, I do have another question about Tech. If you don't mind talking about Tech for a
Sure,
little bit
sure.
longer.
Oh, I never
So
mind talking about Tech.
we love Tech, of course. So he is such a unique character, and he clearly processes things very differently, and he vocalizes what he is processing in a very different way from everyone else. And I don't think just anyone would get that and be able to write that in a way that makes Tech feel himself. And as a teacher, as a middle school teacher, I kind of gravitate towards that like thinking that he has, whereas I think of students I have that like have a very different way of processing or a very different way of communicating. What was your goal and how you wanted Tech to be perceived from like this in this novel? Because you're able to dive a little deeper and we get to know exactly, how he's processing the information. Because in the show, we get little bits of that, and there's moments where he talks to say Omega about that. But in the book, you get to go a whole nother level deeper under the surface with him.
Well, that conversation he had with Omega weighed heavily on me as I was
Mhm,
trying to do that because I feel like we see the end product. We get the deduction, the
mhm,
explanation that he gives us, but I felt like based on what he said to Omega, there was a good way for us to walk through the process before we get to that conclusion.
mm,
And the thing that really I found helpful was to think of it in terms of a youthful love story because in terms of actual time, the 99s are fairly young. And
right.
so text interactions with Fee, to me, probably wouldn't process that much differently than a teenager who's meeting their first love
Mhm.
and trying to figure out what does all this mean? Like, what did he say? When they say this, what does it mean? When they touch my hand, what does it mean? And and knowing that text sort of processes things differently, sort of from the mindset of mathematical equations or
Mhm,
physics or code, it was fun to kind of step through. Okay, this is what this means. This is what it means. My temperature's rising. That means
mm.
this, and that became the template to get what we got in the book.
I love that. No, it's funny you mentioned that it's so easy to forget when you're watching these clone stories that, they're not very old, with those enhanced aging. And I think you made a funny point in the book about how I think maybe it's Tech that says, well, technically Omega is older than all of us
Yes,
because she
yes.
she doesn't have the enhanced aging. And so you mentioned that like how maybe a teenager would perceive this, but something that is fascinating with them is they all take on these different roles in the family that they've created. And of course, they're all, siblings, they're all brothers, and Omega, is their sister. But Hunter is someone that to me has always flirted with he's the older brother of the group essentially, but they're all the same age, but he feels like he's the older brother or even like a father like, figure here because he takes on like that leadership role. So, did you really want to go in and like have him struggle with those questions of how is his role changing in this new world they're in? Or was that something that came on as you started figuring out the story? You were like, oh, this is where I want to go with Hunter. I'm curious, like, where in the process his kind of arc for the story really came forward.
Well, I find it really compelling that you brought up the big brother aspect, but also father,
Hmm.
because if you think about a big brother being left in charge of the household with a bunch
Hmm.
of siblings, they sort of become the de facto father, right?
Yeah.
And with Hunter, and I relate to Hunter with this because I am a father. I'm a father of a young child. And I always got the impression that Hunter puts a lot on himself in that role
Hmm.
because like I feel this too. Like you want to protect your family as
Hmm.
much as you can. You want to anticipate problems and knock those problems out before they hurt the family.
Yeah.
But also as a father, what tends to happen is as the family grows and you see that they can handle problems themselves, you sort of like, oh, maybe I'm overdoing this a little bit because they're
Right.
good. And that's the sort of thing I try to funnel into Hunter or that I feel from Hunter. I call it competent anxiety, where I'm
Okay.
an anxious person, but the things I'm anxious about, I often feel I have the tools to deal with. And my anxiety starts to dial down when I understand my family can deal with problems
Mhm.
too.
And he's wrestling with that throughout this whole book, and it comes to a head, and even he's internally processing that, but then you see the battle that it's happening inside come out, and he's arguing with Fee all the time. He's snapping at his brothers here or there. He even has a little bit sharp with Omega at times. And I'm curious for you, what was the driving force behind wanting Hunter to get where he ends up, like, getting to at the end of the book? Like, did you have, like, a set like, you wanted him to really start to understand that at the end, or was it you wanted to leave it a little bit open-ended with him? Because definitely I could see the Hunter that we have in season 3 and some of the things happen, I could see him forming in this book. Like, I could see you kind of getting us there, and which is funny because you hadn't seen season
Yeah.
3 and it hadn't come out. There was no trailer yet. But a lot of the Hunter I feel like we get at the end of the story in the series, I kind of get to see the early formations of him here.
Yeah, I mean, because here's the thing in Sanctuary, the immediate problems they deal with sort of dovetail with Hunter growing and
Mhm.
understanding he doesn't have to be as aggressive and assertive. And I think he kind of settles down by the end of the book. But what happens
Mhm.
after the book and at the end of the season is it's a whole new horrendous problem of
Mhm.
Omega being taken away from
Right.
him. And
Mhm.
so I don't feel like I feel like he sort of he goes backward a little bit because he has to find her, and that
Right.
requires a different level of focus. But I feel like
Mhm.
for the story I wrote, he definitely settles down, and had things remained more peaceable,
Mhm.
he probably would have continued to mellow out on a smoother trajectory than what we
Right.
actually get when things go south in the show.
Right. And Hunter mellowing out is funny to think about because
Mhm.
he's so tight all the
Yeah,
time and he's so
yeah.
worried. Like you said, it's like any sort of parent or father figure that feels like they're any moment they're losing that grip. It almost reminds me of Hunter in a positive way. In a positive way, it reminds me of episode 4 when Leia's like telling Tarkin, he's like, the more you tighten your grip, the more star systems will slip out of your fingers. Positive way
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Hunter, he's wanting to hold on to everybody, but they're
I
kind
mean,
of moving
I
away
mean,
from it.
that's the dad part. It's like, okay, okay, they can ride their bike. They're not going to flip over
Mhm.
the handlebars and break their neck. But oh my goodness, now they have to drive a car. So it's that sort of resetting of things where you get anxious again and then you mellow out once that problem's solved.
Mhm. So the batch, obviously, the center point of this story, but I have to admit that I was a little bit curious going in, like who are the villains going to be in the story? Because there's only, with a fixed time like that, you don't want to introduce some villains that are like we're all very aware of because
Mm,
they're obviously probably not going to be a part of season 3, but and you don't want to create this, looming person over the whole group. But I was blown away with your choice of using like Celia Moten, and then you have a different type of ISB agent in Crane, which I was like at first, I'm like, all right, another ISB agent. Like, what's this going to be like? Is it going to be similar to what we've seen? But Crane feels so much different from the other ISB agents we've seen in, say, Andor
mhm.
or other, animation shows. Where did those kind of ideas come from to like have these two forces pitting against each other as much as against the Bad Batch?
So there's some practical and pragmatic reasons that I hope don't sound boring.
Okay.
One thing is going into it, and I've written many novels over the years. You
Mhm.
know you have to fill 80,000 words.
Right.
And so with that being what it is, you know you need you need a certain number of characters that you can
Mhm.
pivot to with different motivations to help fill out the story without it seeming to drag.
Mhm.
With Celia and Crane, I wanted two different villains, one to be a physical threat that could go toe to toe in a fight with
Mhm.
members of the batch. And then I wanted something of what I called a power broker. I didn't have names for these characters when I was coming up with them, but I was like,
Mhm.
I want someone who can kind of pull the lever on physical and military force, and then someone who at least thinks they can pull the lever on political force and
Oh.
money and financial force, because those four pillars of opposition are
Mhm.
almost insurmountable. But we have a
Mhm.
gang of clones who can pretty much figure their way out of anything,
Right.
even if they have to improvise. And so I
Mhm.
wanted all these pieces in place, so I had enough to build on to give a full novel length story. So it was
Mhm.
out of necessity first of all, but then
Right.
it became fun to be able to
Mhm.
write these characters' personalities and bring them to life.
Mhm. No, that's not boring at all. It makes sense perfectly when you think about those four pillars, and then the personality comes into it. And the personalities are so they feel so alive. Like you can perfectly see and feel those motivations. And I can picture what it's like for Celia to want to become, a regional governor is like one of her end games that she wants. And when she names drops Emperor Palpatine, she says, "Oh, have you talked to Sheev recently?" That's when I immediately raised my eyebrows because the first time that we met Celia, I'm thinking to myself, all right, maybe she won't be that prevalent in the story. She's going to be like a launching pad for their fight against the ISB. And then she name drops Sheev real quick. And I'm like, oh no, this is like you said, the power broker, the person to be reckoned with. Was that fun for you to kind of put some little things in there that you knew readers would be like, oh, this person is maybe not what I thought she was?
Oh, it was definitely fun, but I also felt it was necessary because
Hmm.
being that I couldn't contradict anything that was coming later and I didn't know
Right.
what was coming later, I knew I had to create new characters that I knew could not pop up in season three. And in my mind, I'm asking a lot of my fellow fans to sort of buy into these characters they've never met before.
Hmm.
So I need to work in some familiar touchstones
Hmm.
that'll make them say, okay, I haven't not met Crane before and I've not met Celia before, but I know who they know.
Hmm.
And that's also fun because being a lifelong fan, like the idea of being able to write to some of these characters that I grew up seeing on my screen as a kid, can't really beat that.
Right. No, that it was it was fun because there's a level of familiarity with this book, with the villains, that when you haven't met them before, like you said, you still feel connected to them because of maybe some of the name dropping going on, or some of those titles and just how they're acting. And even the new characters that you bring in on the clone side of things, just the some of the surprises there with who
Mhm.
the hooded figure is that's with
Yeah.
the pregnant woman, and those type of things that you instantly just have those instant connections with them. So I really appreciated that. Which one did you like enjoy writing more? Was it Celia, Crane? Did you gravitate one over the
I
other?
I honestly I really like writing Celia because I also hate
Mhm.
Celia. Like
Mhm.
she's despicable, and not only she's despicable for reasons I won't spoil here, but she's that person that met a celebrity at a party once and tells you that's her friend. And she's like, me and Brad Pitt go way back.
Mhm.
Everybody hates that person. And so I
Right.
really like getting into her head. And, I really like the arc of where she ended up.
And then, oh, that was we have to come back. We might have a moment at the end where it's like spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Stop listening, so we could talk about that one because that was fantastic. And I was thinking, I was like, could that happen? And then when it did, I not even was not expecting that. That was fantastic. And then what you said about Celia being that person that you hate, but you can't let her know that that's the person that that you hate her so much because she's going to kill you and then
Yeah.
plant your body in the yard and plant a tree over
Yeah.
you, and she has the trees that go on for it seemed like miles in the book.
Yeah, that was a little bit of my horror roots coming through. Like I'm a
Hmm.
big horror guy. I grew up loving Stephen King, Have written a
Okay.
couple of horror novels myself, so I had to squeeze a little bit of that in there.
And then there's these games of cat and mouse that are going on with Crane and with Celia, just going back and forth, trying to one of them trying to use the other for their own means. What was that like? Because there's a lot of times in these books, it's like, all right, here's the bad guy, and here's the good guy, and they're gonna go head to head. But in this book, the bad guys are also working against each other throughout the
Mhm.
entire thing.
Now I love writing tug of war stuff like that, and
Mhm.
I feel like there's a lot of real world political intrigue in that. I think that's what happens at the highest level of
Mhm.
any nation's government. You've got two people jostling for something they want and trying to flatter the other one while also not giving up ground. And I think that becomes very interesting when you know they're being played and they know they're being played, but this game must go on.
Mhm. I have to ask, this is gonna change. This is gonna be a stark contrast. So we've talked about bad guys so much. Now, Omega, the little sweet child of the group, is it possible? I just want to know if it's humanly possible to write moments with Omega and not smile. Like, is it possible to not smile while you're writing Omega? Every time I read something about Omega, I'm just smiling like ear to ear.
Omega is pure sunshine, even in a fight. So I mean,
Uh-huh.
I can't say I if someone can write her scenes and not be happy, uh, I would like to meet them and talk to them and see what's wrong. Because it's she's just a fantastically sweet character. Um, and like I would love to. This has nothing to do with what I wrote, but just the
Mhm,
way we get her at the end of the series, I want to
mhm,
see more. Um, I, I I I don't think there's a scenario where I wouldn't enjoy spending time with Omega.
mhm. I couldn't agree more, and I would love to see how she's still that same youthful child, like when she's growing up, joining the rebellion, and she's a young woman, and still has that. Are they okay? Like every time, even when they're fighting people, and it looks like, all right, we just got to protect her own. She was looking in the book too, just like she would in the show. She's looking, oh, should we help them out? We got to
Yeah.
do the right thing here, and I love this the balance that she gives to the rest of the team. And I also some people might say, "Oh, Omega, easiest character to write. You just make people smile." I feel like there's a challenge in writing Omega because you don't want to go over the top with how, oh, she's incredible at everything right away, or she's the sweetest, perfect child all the time. But you kind of have to be careful how you use her. What was there any challenges in trying not to go like over the top with Omega in the book?
Well, I think it's important to remember, at least at this stage in her life,
Mhm,
she is still at the very if her even if her mind is a little more expansive than a child's, she is
mhm,
still child size. And
mhm,
size and weight matter in situations of dangerous predators coming after you.
mhm,
And so as much of a ray of sunshine as she is, when things go south and the rest of the clones aren't there to have her back.
mhm,
You really got to treat that like a child is in danger.
mhm,
And what can that child do to protect themselves
mhm,
until they can either get out of danger or help comes?
mhm,
And that's the way I think you balance Omega. But at the same time, she's incredibly capable in
mhm.
situations that aren't dangerous to her. And so I
Right.
tried to give her some things to do in the book that shows off some of her scientific skills that we know she
Mhm.
has. Um, I'll leave it at that because
No, yeah,
spoiler
I
spoiler alert.
appreciated that because you have her using her, scientific genius, later on in the book. But the first time we see her in the book is she's trying to help this little creature out that's trapped, and she wants
Mhm.
to set it free so it can run around and be happy. And then obviously that creature aids them in their escape real quick. It felt like a perfect start to the book. It's like, all right, here we are, we're back, here it is, like not skipping a beat or anything like that. So I love how, like, even her story, you just kind of gave us the Omega familiarity that we love, and then you really expanded upon her. But a character, one more character, the Batch here, that I appreciated the way you wrote Wrecker, because a lot of times I felt that sometimes Wrecker can be just pretty much a caricature, and
Yeah.
he's just the guy that blows things up, and his Uncle Wrecker, he blows things up. And there's not a lot of moments in the series where we really get, what does he want? Like, what does he really want inside? What are his motivations? And, how does he relate to things besides he just wants to protect his family and set off explosives. But in the book, there are a few moments where he is open and talking with Hunter about this could be home, or home looks like this for me, or I don't need to be tied down here. What were you motivated to try to give Wrecker his own like motivations and let those become clear in the book, as opposed to maybe the series where he isn't allowed to maybe shine as much as the others?
So I'm glad you brought it up because I'll make a confession. In early drafting, I was probably doing the caricature.
Mm-hmm.
And and here's the thing: when you write a Star Wars novel that's really, it's a team effort. The
Mm-hmm.
story team is very helpful. And someone on the story team reminded me, said, "Hey, there's nothing wrong here, but remember, every member of Clone Force 99 is extremely capable and has their depths. And that should
Mm-hmm.
also be the case with Record." So once I got that note, it freed me up to say, hey, I can do more here. And I had
Mm-hmm.
specific places in the book where I'm like, I'm going in, I'm going to add
Yeah.
some for Record. And one of my favorite conversations that Record has, I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil things, but he talks to Hunter and another person about how they know everything there is to know about fighting, but there's a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of stuff they don't know anything about. And he
Mm-hmm.
wants to know more about this particular thing. And he starts to ask his questions. And that was like my favorite line to write for Record.
Mm-hmm. That's I really appreciate that. And that shows too just how much of a process like writing the book is. I think we take, especially as Star Wars fans, we're always taking stories for granted sometimes of, oh, here's the next novel here. Oh, when are you gonna give us this story? And we take them, we read them, and then we move on to the next one and forget that, yeah, this one author had to write 80,000 words for this, and then there's a whole team of people around them. And so I love how even in your own writing, you kind of experience that process of, getting Wrecker out there and full-fledged character a little bit. Is there, we talked about all of them at this point except for Crosshair, and Crosshair obviously not really in the book, but that's not really a fair statement to say he's not in the book. He's mentioned
His presence
several
is felt.
times, and his
Yeah.
presence is completely felt, and it looms large over the story. Obviously, you probably couldn't include him in the story given, what's going on in season 2 at the time. What was the process for Crosshair? Because you have to let the audience know, hey, I know he's missing too,
Yeah.
and this is how they're going to be feeling it at this time. I'm curious.
Well, I mean, Crosshair and Echo to an extent, right?
And Echo,
And
yes.
Echo.
Mhm,
I knew I couldn't include them because, like you said, of the timeline. I can't
mhm,
contradict things, but probably Crosshair more than Echo. I was determined to get more of him into the book just
mhm.
because I felt like I had to have all of the 99s represented.
Right.
And I couldn't do a lot with it. I won't spoil what I did because it's later in the book, but I
Mhm,
was able to find an angle that let me write to Crosshair for
mhm,
a very short period,
mhm.
and that was incredibly satisfying. You can't see it from the way my camera angle is, but over here, over the
Okay.
door to my office, I have all the Hot Toys 99. So I have
I love that.
I have Hunter Wrecker, Tech, and then Crosshair. And I was like, as I'm writing and looking at that shelf, I'm like, I got to get all you guys in. And I think I posted a picture of them on Instagram if anybody wants to see that shelf.
Love that.
But
I love that.
yeah, yeah.
No, because Crosshair's presence definitely is looming large in this one, and you think about him constantly. And I appreciate you said you mentioned Echo too, but the difference in how it's felt on the group is entirely different because Crosshair they feel like abandoned and
Hmm.
almost probably a little resentful, and there's a lot of hurt there. Versus Echo, they at least understand, and
They kind of
they're
know
kind of
where he
there.
is.
They
You
know
know,
what's going on. They've seen him from time to time.
yeah,
He pops in when he can. But Omega too, and obviously, and see, we've seen season 3 now, and we know how close Omega and Crosshair are. But there's
mm,
a distinct line in the book where someone like I don't remember someone mentioned Crosshair exactly, or he was brought up, and then Omega just had that little thought to herself how she didn't really know Crosshair. She didn't really love Crosshair like she loves the rest. She hopes that he turns around someday. But
yeah,
I love that because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like girl, you're about to go meet your other brother soon, and obviously it's horrible, but it's going to be okay. And but did you have any idea when you were writing this that the two of them were going to be as close in the end as they were, or was that more of you're just writing, Omega doesn't know Crosshair, so she doesn't know him?
So at that point, I had seen season three. So when I started the
Okay, okay.
process, season three hadn't come out. By the time I was writing that line, I had seen season three. So I had the ability to reverse foreshadow.
I
And
love
that's
that.
so that's where that line came from.
Okay.
I knew how that relationship ended up. I was like,
Mhm,
okay, I could drop something right here. And I felt if I think it felt right for Omega's character
mhm.
to have sort of a positive outlook on how things might eventually be with Crosshair. Like families fight, but we'll come around.
I love that. I love that. So if there was a member of the batch, we'll include Crosshair and Echo in here as well, even though they're not, too much in the book, that you feel like you personally resonate with the most, like just as a person, which one are do you pick? Like which one are you do you gravitate towards a little more?
It's Hunter, because
Mm,
I feel
mm,
that stress. I feel
mhm,
that anxiety of like trying to make sure the family's good, trying to anticipate the problems. When the problems pop up, being a little bit stressed out about how we handle them, always worried about everybody's safety. So
mhm,
I put a bunch of, I felt that in Hunter watching the show. And so maybe it's sort of like a boomerang effect where I felt it.
mhm.
And then some of what I felt, I threw on to him and then he threw it back. And it was just back and forth all the way through the book. But it's definitely Hunter.
Okay. I had a feeling based off of some things you mentioned earlier, that's where you were going. Okay, I have two future story related questions for you. Okay. So
Sure.
you just finished up, Bad Batch Sanctuary here. It's your first, full-fledged Star Wars novel. Okay. Now that, this book is behind you, if you had to go pick, if you had they came to you like, Lamar, you
Yeah.
could pick whatever story you want to write, like whatever era, whatever characters. What do you have an idea of where you would personally want to go?
I would love to tell some Jedi stories. And
Mhm.
specifically, I don't know why this trio has stood out to me, but feel like I want to write some sort of adventure with Yoda, Mace Windu, and Kit Fisto. And
Okay.
I have no clue what it would be. Like I don't have any kind of pitch or anything like that. But for some reason, I mean, first of all, I just love Mace.
Mhm.
Have loved Yoda since childhood, and I think Kit Fisto has one of the greatest character designs in the whole
Mhm.
galaxy. So in my mind, I always had like, if I had a wish list, I want to write that trio doing something, whether that's a short story, novel, comic book. I have no clue what it would be, but that's my wish list.
That's awesome. Such a perfect. This is a blend of characters, and I also feel like that would be just a lot of organized chaos with the three
Yeah,
of
yeah,
them because
yeah,
of the
yeah.
different ways that they approach things. I love that. That's surprising. Okay, next thing. I got three ideas. This is my personal ideas for three Bad Batch novels of potential stories I would love to see put to paper. And I would love for you to tell me which one, if you had to pick one of those
Mhm.
three to write, which one would you do? Or are they all so bad? They're terrible. Like we can't, you're like, I can't even touch this. I'm not touching this. This is garbage. Okay.
I bet they're great. I bet they're great. But I'll just put the disclaimer out. I have no power here. I have no
Right.
power
Right.
here
No,
whatsoever.
this
Okay,
is
go for it.
this
Go
is
for it.
perfectly just,
Yeah, yeah.
me to the Bad Batch writer himself would love to
Sure.
know which one he'd be. So the first one would be like cadet training for Clone Force 99
Okay.
leading into their first mission.
Yeah.
And then we kind of get to see, how the tech turn, could come out or some of their early code names, how Hunter assumes that leadership role and they all kind of find their place. I would love to see what was the first mission like, who was the first Jedi that they worked with, things like that in the Clone Wars. And then, what was their training like? Was it expedited because their enhanced abilities, or were they more nervous about them and reined them in a little bit? So that's idea number one
That'll work.
is first mission. Or go like chronologically in
Sure,
my
sure.
brain, right? So that's number one is first mission. Number two is a Bad Batch Star Wars Rebels crossover book where Omega is reunited with Hera, years later, and then Kanan would obviously he be reunited with the Bad Batch since he was a kid, and then the show like that's how Order 66 happens. They're a part of that,
Hmm.
and I always felt in my mind that at the end of Bad Batch, when Omega goes off to join the rebellion, that it was kind of around, maybe right around when Lothal happened,
Yeah.
and she's like, "Oh, those are my friends. They just made this sacrifice. I got to go join the cause." And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of bring some of those, characters back together for just some sort of mission, and Rex can be involved or Echo to bring. He's like, we got these older. They're older now, but they could
Yeah.
help us out with something. So that's idea number two.
Hmm.
And then the last one is, Omega has already joined the rebellion. We're right before Empire Strikes Back. And in my personal headcanon, like there's a lot of Clone Force clone fans that have done this in their personal headcanon. The Echo base from Empire Strikes Back is actually named after Echo and not just the echoes in the caverns of Hoth. So my idea there would be Omega and Echo are trying to find the new rebel base for the rebellion before, and they got to call in maybe other members of the batch in order to make that happen. They're a lot older at this point, but it's like one last hurrah. And maybe this is where Echo maybe has to some sort of sacrifice for himself or something along those lines. So those are my, I would love to see those three stories. I'm sure there's a
Yeah.
lot of other Bad Batch stories, but if you had to pick one, I'm just curious, which one would you personally be like, I would love to write that story?
I would like to write that middle one. I'm really
Okay.
curious about um, Omega going off to join the rebellion, and like you said, reuniting with Hera, getting like I think about like old man Clone Force 99 calling them in to help with some
Yeah.
problem. That is appealing to me. Not that and all three of them are good, Tyler. All
No,
three of those ideas are good.
you don't have
I'm
to lie to
serious.
me
I'm
too.
serious. I'm
I
serious.
can take
I'm
it.
serious. All three of those are good. But if you're asking me which one I would gravitate to first, it's that middle one.
Okay, I love that. And
Mhm.
I mean, like I said, you have like I'm a middle school teacher. I get destroyed every day, at least a few dozen
No,
times.
I mean, like I think all of those are viable stories. I mean, that's the
Okay.
beauty of us meeting them at the
Hmm.
times we meet them. Like
Right.
you can always tell stories before and after.
So I got a few quick hitters here, just rapid fire to close us out. Are you game? Are you
I'm
game?
good. I'm good. Let's do it.
All right. This is just for fun. All right. Which batch member would you trust most with your life?
Record.
Wrecker. Oh, okay. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So you are now taking the place of Luke Skywalker in episode 4. Luke no longer exists. It's you. As Lamar Giles, you're making your trench run
Okay.
to destroy the Death Star. You have any era of Star Wars to choose from. Okay. All characters are available to you. Who would you want as like your wingman on the X-wing, near you? Who would you want as your wingman as you're trying to help destroy the Death Star?
I'm gonna say Finn. If I could pull from
Okay.
any era, because I think Finn got a little shortchanged. So I'd love to give him
Mhm.
a little more work. 'Cause I think he's capable.
I love that. I can't argue with that. All right, favorite Star Wars movie or show?
Movies, Rogue One.
Okay, I love that.
Mm,
And if you had to pick a
it-
show?
Come on, the Bad Batch.
It's gotta be so it's too easy, too easy, too easy. Gotta be the batch. Gotta be the batch. Rogue One, I love that. Tell me about Rogue One real fast. Like why Rogue One?
Because I sort of like the idea of people sort of more on the ground level who have to sacrifice something for the
Mhm,
rebellion. I think that speaks to the character of a lot of regular people. And
mhm,
then bonus on top of seeing that mission and what they had to sacrifice, you get that incredible Vader corridor scene, which in my
yep,
mind is the greatest depiction of Vader on screen yet.
mhm. I love
So
that.
put those two together. I mean, it's not a competition for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like it's a runaway because I love so
Right,
many of
right.
the other films, but I probably in recent years have gone back to Rogue One more.
Mhm. I'll never forget being in theaters and seeing I was with my dad actually at the time when Rogue One came out, and when that lightsaber ignites in the hallway scene, and you hear everyone just like that gasp, everyone just kind of holds their breath for a minute.
It was like a horror movie. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
I felt severe empathy for those men on that corridor because you
Mhm.
knew it was going to happen, and
You knew it was over.
it was. But in service of the bigger goal, they did what
Mhm.
they had to do to hold them off long enough to get those
Mhm.
plans out the door, and that's also a sort of display of bravery that really
Mhm.
touches me.
Absolutely. I love that. All right. So a lot of the members of the batch have their enhanced abilities. Okay. Which enhanced ability would you want for yourself? Like the strength? Would it be the tracking and some of the leadership for Hunter? What kind of abilities would you want?
I mean, I'm gonna go back to my man record. I'm gonna say the strength, and that's just because as I'm getting older, and physical things are becoming more difficult in ways I didn't anticipate. I'm like, it would be really cool to be strong like I was in my youth. So
And
I
still
would take
pick things
record
up all the
strength.
time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like,
No, of course.
you know, the things that didn't seem heavy before throw your back out now. So I mean, I take the strength.
Oh, okay, all right. And then last one, if you were a Jedi, what would your specialty be? Like, are you the diplomat? Are you the one they send to go undercover? Are you the enforcer? Like, what would your role be? What would your specialty be as a Jedi?
I think I would be a diplomat because I think most problems can be talked out.
Mhm.
With that, but I'm a Jedi, so if things go south, I can do what I got to do. But
Mhm.
I would want to go and try to like hash it out in ways where we don't have to lose people or hurt people.
Well, Lamar, thank you so much for hopping on and chatting about Sanctuary. I really did enjoy it. It's a fantastic book. Anyone that hasn't given it a shot yet, definitely should. But is there anything else that you would like to promote besides, Sanctuary right now? Is there anything you want to get the word out on?
It's Sanctuary all the way down right now. I don't have
Mhm.
anything coming out for a while. I'm working on some new stuff, some new mystery novels. But that'll be a while. So I mean, just if you're looking for my work, my website's lamargiles.com. I've done a bunch of different things that you might like, but I'm happy that if you're enjoying Star Wars Sanctuary, and I appreciate all the readers out there.
All right, everybody. It's Lamar Giles. The book is Sanctuary. It's a Bad Batch novel. Check it out. It's fantastic. Until next time, we'll see you later.